All right. Welcome AP Lit class. I'm going to talk a little bit this time about Act 1, Scene 1 and 2. As I already said, if you go to the Drive folder, you'll see the quiz questions. And on Thursday, there's going to be a quiz on all of Act 1. So I'll talk a little bit about Act 1, Scene 1 and 2 in this video. There's another video that covers Act 1, Scenes 3, 4, and 5. So I'm going to click on this page here. It's also in the Drive folder. If you have the text, awesome, but I'll just use the online version for this. Elsinore, I don't know if I mentioned, that's the name of the castle or the sort of, what would you say, the fort, the village where the Hamlet's kingdom is in Denmark. So let's see. Who's there? Nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. Long live the king, Bernardo, he. Okay, I talked a little bit about this exchange here. It's important to know that it's very cold. 'Tis bitter cold. And he says, and I am sick at heart. Why might he be sick at heart? Maybe he's grieving the death of King Hamlet, not Prince Hamlet, but Hamlet's father, King Hamlet. We find out about that later on. There's a changing of the guard, symbolic. Why? Because there's a change of regimes. Why are they standing on guard? It turns out that Horatio will explain, the ghost appears, for one thing. And they brought Horatio to come, verify that there is a ghost looking around. And the Night Watch has seen it a few times, so Horatio is a learned man, rational. Therefore I have entreated him along with us to watch the minutes of this night, that if again this apparition come, apparition meaning ghost, he may approve our eyes and speak to it. And then Horatio says, tush, tush, 'twill not appear. And then Bernardo says, sit down a while. So Horatio is already a little bit of a skeptic. The bell starts to ring, and lo and behold, enter the ghost. By the way, scholars think the ghost was probably played by Shakespeare himself. They say that it looks just like the king that's dead. Marcellus says, thou art a scholar, speak to it, Horatio. And then it stalks away. Stay, speak, speak, I charge thee, speak. And the ghost leaves. The ghost won't talk to them. If you are watching this play, Shakespearean times, this is a really exciting opening scene. The ghost had to have just been really pretty spooky. There's a lot of tension, and it's in the middle of the night. It's cold. All of this signifies that it's going to be a tragedy of some kind. There's going to be some kind of murder happening. Excuse me. The audience is already keyed into this genre. We're not used to theater in the same way that they were. Also, back then, ghosts were kind of things that people, believed in, probably more so than we do nowadays. So the supernatural being conjured on stage, had to have really had a big impact on the audience. An important piece of exposition is Horatio's explanation as to why there is a watch, and why people are standing guard outside of it, the castle of Elsinore. And an exposition means it's a delivery of information that is necessary to understand the full picture of the story. So what exposition do we get is that there's this dude named Fortinbras of Norway. Okay, I won't read this whole speech, but I will summarize it. Basically, old King Hamlet was pretty much a badass, a conqueror. He beat Fortinbras the Elder and claimed some lands, etc. This Elder Fortinbras dude died, and then to the inheritance of Fortinbras had he been the vanquisher, as by the same covenant and carriage of the article designed, his fell to Hamlet. Now Sir young Fortinbras of unimproved metal, hot and full, hath in the skirts of Norway here and there sharked up a list of lawless resolutes for food and diet to some enterprise that hath stomach in it. Basically, young Fortinbras is marching down to reclaim some territories lost by his father. So he is going to be asking for permission to travel through their land. He's not immediately attacking Denmark, but he is after some lands lost by his father. And Horatio says, I take it is the main motive of our preparations, the source of this our watch, and the chief head of this post-haste and rummage in the land. Anyway, so, and then here's this famous allusion that Horatio makes to the death of Julius Caesar. A mote it is to trouble the mind's eye, referring to the ghost and perhaps Fortinbras. In the most high and palmy state of Rome, a little ere the mightiest Julius fell, the grave stood tenantless, and the sheeted dead did squeak and gibber in the Roman streets. Okay, that a grave is a place where people reside. A tenant is somebody who resides in a place owned by a landlord. So graves are being compared metaphorically to tenants. A tenantless grave would mean a grave where a ghost has come out of. The sheeted dead, like you think of dead people being covered in a sheet. They did squeak and gibber in the Roman streets, so they were actually walking around in the streets. This is an important motif because, here comes the ghost again. A ghost means that something is wrong. Okay, there's been some kind of crime committed, perhaps, just like Julius's assassination. Later we find out that Claudius probably was the one who assassinated Hamlet Sr., and that comes later on. They decide we got to go tell Hamlet what's going on and have him come check out the ghost. So moving on to Act 1, Scene 2, we see King Claudius, and this is a very slick speech that he gives, sort of addressing the whole state. And he basically says, well, there's some oxymorons in here, which are kind of interesting. When he says that we with wisest sorrow think on him, together with the remembrance of ourselves. Therefore our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a dropping eye. Okay, this is an oxymoron here. With mirth and funeral, and with dirge and marriage. In equal scale weighing delight with dole, taken to wife. Just to show you a really quick definition of oxymoron, it's a figure of speech in which contradictory terms appear in conjunction. The example they give is faith unfaithful kept him falsely true. Okay, that's a little bit of a mind twister. Okay, so back to the text. He says that basically it's important that we have to move on. It's important to hold the state together. That's why the jointress, meaning Gertrude the queen, they had to marry in order to fill the power vacuum and to keep the state together. He alludes to Fortinbras and sort of dusts him aside as young Fortinbras, holding a weak supposal of our worth, might think that we're disjointed and out of frame, but that's not the case. So in a way, he's sort of fear-mongering. It's like, I have to be the king now, otherwise we might be vulnerable. Some people might be thinking, well, what about Prince Hamlet being the king? So he says, look, I'm being politically savvy here. I'm writing to the uncle of this young Fortinbras, and I'm going to tell him to make sure his nephew just chills out a little bit and leaves us alone. Cornelius is a messenger of Voltimand. Go ahead and take this document to the king, or I'm sorry, take this document to the uncle of young Fortinbras in Norway, just to make sure that he doesn't overstep his bounds. He can pass through our land, but, that's about all. The thing is, though, that, spoiler alert, later on, Fortinbras does become a formidable enemy or opponent to Denmark. And then you see this schmoozing going on with Laertes. Okay, Laertes, the brother of Ophelia, he has come for the funeral and for the marriage, which have happened really closely together. And Claudius basically says, you have my leave to go back to France to study. And Polonius is introduced as the advisor, and Polonius grants Laertes his leave to go back to study. Okay, and Gertrude is up there on stage too, and here we see Hamlet. And Claudius first addresses Hamlet here. But now, my cousin Hamlet and my son. And Hamlet says aside, only the audience hears this. He's sort of snarking, and nobody else hears it but the audience. And Hamlet says, a little more than kin and less than kind. Meaning, kin means a relative, okay? A relation. Claudius is too close. He's too much more than he needs to be in terms of Hamlet's relative, having gone from an uncle to now his father, and less than kind, as in he doesn't take very kindly to this maneuvering of Claudius to marry his mother. King Claudius says, how is the clouds still hang on you? And Hamlet, there we see Hamlet's wit. Not so, my lord, I am too much the sun. I am too much in the sun. Sun can be a pun. Son sounds like son, and a father has a son. So if he says, I am too much in the sun, he says, I am too much, it's too much for me to be your son. Also, king is associated with the sun. So if I am too much in the sun, he is kind of saying, I am too close to you, I hate being around you, you give me sunburn, I don't like being around you. I don't know if Claudius gets this or not. Anyway, Gertrude says, Hamlet, cast thy nighted color off. Nighted means black. Hamlet is famous for wearing black. She's telling him to cheer up. Why seems it so particular with thee? Seems, madam, nay, it is. I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, my dark clothing, good mother, nor customary suits of sullen black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath. That would be sigh. Hamlet is saying, I'm not putting up appearances, okay? Things are what they seem when you see me dressed in black. I am grief-stricken, mournful, and it's not about seeming. But there is also a pun. Seam can mean like a seam in clothing, and clothing being held together by seams, what seams might be breaking apart.